When my mother first told me she'd taken a job at the university, I didn't think much of it. She said it was cleaning work, long hours, low pay, but honest. We needed the money, and she never complained. What I didn't know then was that those quiet nights she spent mopping the marble floors of the linguistics department would become the start of something that would change both our lives forever. It began on a rainy Tuesday evening. The corridors were empty, echoing with the soft squeak of my mother's cleaning cart. Most of the professors had gone home, except for one Dr. Roberto Manzini, the university's most respected linguist. He was known for his sharp mind and even sharper tongue. To him, anyone outside academia was invisible. That night, as my mother polished the brass nameplate, she noticed something odd in the storage room, a heavy crate, labeled Colombo Excavation 1834. Inside it lay a dark, flat stone covered with strange carvings that shimmered faintly under the light. She didn't know what it was, but she recognized one symbol. It was the same mark carved into an old wooden amulet my great-grandfather used to wear, a pattern he said had been passed down for generations. My mother froze. She could almost hear his voice again, telling stories of people who spoke through hidden symbols when their real language was forbidden. The next morning she told me everything. "Letitia," she said softly, "I saw something last night. Something that feels like it's calling our name." I was 16, more curious than cautious. My great-grandfather, Samuel Santos, had spent his life collecting fragments of forgotten dialects, words whispered by ancestors who had survived through silence. I thought his notebooks were just old family keepsakes. But now, hearing my mother's trembling voice, something deep inside me stirred. A few days later, I convinced her to take me along to the university. She hesitated at first. Students didn't belong in the staff areas, but finally agreed. "Just stay quiet," she whispered, as we walked to the gleaming halls, filled with portraits of white-haired men in suits. And then I saw it. The stone, resting on a metal table in the center of the lab, guarded by glass. Its surface was filled with swirling patterns, circles, lines, and dots that seemed to dance when the light shifted. My heart pounded. I opened my backpack and pulled out one of my great-grandfather's old notebooks. My hands shook as I flipped through the yellowed pages. The symbols, they weren't identical, but close. Almost like two dialects of the same hidden tongue. That was when I heard footsteps. Dr. Manzini entered, followed by a group of students and journalists. They were setting up for a public lecture. Apparently, the university had just discovered this mysterious colonial artifact, and Manzini was going to decode it live. He looked at me and frowned. "Who are you? You don't belong here." Before I could speak, my mother appeared breathless. "She's with me, sir. I was just finishing my shift." He waved her off. "Then finish it elsewhere. This is a place for scholars, not staff." I clenched my fists but said nothing. My mother tugged at my sleeve. "Let's go," she whispered. But as we walked out, I couldn't stop staring at that stone. Something about it felt alive, like it held centuries of unspoken pain. That night, I stayed up studying my great-grandfather's notes. Words mixed with sketches, coded grammar charts, fragments of phrases, like path that disappears and place to hide. One note stood out underlined twice. "The true language of freedom is not spoken, it's remembered." For days, I couldn't think of anything else. I started comparing the markings from the university stone to the symbols in a notebook, and slowly patterns began to form. The lines weren't random. They followed rhythm like poetry carved into stone. When the day of the official presentation arrived, I begged my mother to let me go. "They'll laugh at me," she said. "They won't listen." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to be there. The auditorium was packed, professors, students, reporters. My mother stood quietly in the back, wearing her faded janitor uniform. I sat beside her, clutching my notebook, so tightly my knuckles turned white. Dr. Manzini began his speech with the confidence of a man who believed he knew everything. "This stone," he said, "represents the earliest colonial attempt at written Portuguese. Primitive but fascinating." He pointed a red laser at the carvings. "You see this, likely a prayer. This here may be an agricultural symbol. We'll never know for sure." People chuckled softly. Cameras clicked, but my chest burned. Every symbol he misread was like hearing someone mispronounce my ancestors' names. He was erasing them again, just like history had done centuries before. Finally, he turned and said with a smirk, "Perhaps our cleaning staff would like to offer their interpretation, since they seemed so interested. Some people laughed. My mother looked down ashamed, but I couldn't stay silent. I stood up. My voice trembled at first, but the anger made it steady. "Dr. Manzini, I said you're reading those symbols wrong." The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. He blinked amused. "Excuse me. You're reading them as Old Portuguese," I continued. "But they're not. They're a fusion of coded language built by people who weren't allowed to write their own." The crowd stirred. Someone whispered. My mother's eyes widened in fear. But I felt something powerful rising inside me, the same quiet strength my great-grandfather always spoke of. "You can't possibly know that," Manzini snapped. "Even experts can't decipher this." "I know, because it's not lost," I said, holding up the notebook. "It was never lost. You just never looked in the right places." He laughed a cold, brittle sound. So now we have a self-taught linguist among the janitors." But this time no one laughed with him. The air in the room had changed, because deep down everyone could feel that something extraordinary was about to happen. And as I stepped toward the stage, notebook in hand, my mother's tearful eyes met mine. She nodded, just once giving me silent permission to do what generations before her had been denied. That was the moment I decided I would not let history bury us again. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd just escaped a war. My head was pounding, my heart heavy, and every time I replayed last night's scene in my mind, I felt the same wave of anger and disbelief. The HOA board had turned on me. The same people who'd once smiled at my barbecues now looked at me like I was dirt under their fancy polished shoes. But I wasn't done. Not yet. See, when you've been pushed into a corner long enough, you stop playing by their rules. And that's exactly what I was about to do. That morning I drove to the local municipal office and requested copies of every HOA complaint email and fine ever filed in our neighborhood for the past 2 years. The clerk looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You sure you want all of that?" she asked. "Oh, I'm sure," I said. 2 hours later, I walked out with a fat stack of printed pages, proof of what I'd suspected all along. Karen wasn't just a noisy neighbor. She was a manipulator. The kind of woman who'd quietly file anonymous complaints to rack up fines on other residents, then use those fines to fund her personal projects. Projects like her precious rose garden, her front porch remodel, and that brand new gate she bragged about last week. She'd been using the HOA like her personal piggy bank. I sat in my car staring at the papers, my pulse racing. Every document was another nail in her coffin. Every line of text screamed her name. I couldn't believe how deep the rot went. I knew what I had to do next. That evening I attended the emergency HOA board meeting Karen herself had called to address my misconduct. The irony made me laugh out loud. When I walked in, the room went silent. You could feel the tension hanging in the air like smoke. Karen was sitting at the front table in her signature floral dress, a smug grin plastered across her face. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said sweetly, but her eyes were sharp as razors. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied. She turned to the board. "As you all know, we're here to discuss the continued violations and disruptive behavior of Mr. Devon here." I raised a hand. "Actually, before you go on, I think it's time we discuss your behavior, Karen." She froze. The other board members exchanged nervous glances. I walked up to the front and laid the stack of documents on the table. Every single complaint, every fine, every transaction. All signed off by you, and all benefiting well you. For a moment she looked confused, then furious. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're grasping at straws." "Really?" I said, flipping to one page. "Because this fine, issued to the Johnsons for an unapproved mailbox, paid for your 2,500 rose bushes, and this one the Andersons' late fee that covered your new security gate." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the board members, a quiet man named Rick, leaned forward and asked, "Is this true, Karen?" She sputtered. "Of course not, he's making this up." I smiled coldly. "Then why are your initials at the bottom of every approval form?" Silence. That's when Rick turned to the others and said, "I think we should verify these." Karen's voice trembled. "You can't just... These are confidential." "Not anymore," I said, "because I also filed an official request with the city's HOA Oversight Office this morning. They'll be reviewing all financials under your administration. So, If I were you, I'd start rehearsing your excuses. Her face drained of color. The meeting ended in chaos. Karen stormed out muttering curses under her breath while the rest of the board sat there stunned. I left feeling like I'd finally turned the tables. For the first time in months, I could breathe, but that victory didn't last long. 2 nights later, around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery outside my house. Confused, I threw on a jacket and ran to the window. What I saw made my blood boil. Karen had hired a cement truck, and it was pouring fresh concrete right across my driveway. I stormed outside, yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" She stood there, arms crossed, smirking under the streetlight. "Just enforcing HOA policy, Devin. You didn't get your new gate approved, remember?" I couldn't believe it. She was blocking me in my own property. Again, the workers hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Are you sure about this?" one of them asked. Karen snapped. "Do your job, I'll handle him." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You're trespassing, Karen. This is illegal, and I've got all on video." She leaned in close, her voice dripping with venom. "Go ahead. You think anyone's going to believe you after what you pulled at that meeting?" For a moment, I actually doubted myself. Maybe she was right. She still had influence. She still had connections. But then I saw the flashing lights. A police cruiser turned the corner and pulled up beside us. Karen's smug grin vanished. The officer stepped out and asked what was going on. I explained everything. How she'd been harassing me, misusing HOA funds, and now, quite literally cemented me into my own house. The cop looked at Karen. "Is this true, ma'am?" She started to protest, but before she could, I handed over the HOA documents, and my phone still recording. He took one look at the papers and said, "Ma'am, step aside." Karen's voice wavered. "He's lying. This is all a setup." The officer sighed. "Then you won't mind if we verify that with the HOA oversight office." Her face fell. By the time they told the cement truck to stop and back out, half my driveway was ruined. But Karen's little stunt had backfired. And as the police car drove off with her giving her statement, I couldn't help but smile, because something told me this was far from over. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails. Everyone in the neighborhood was talking about what happened last night. Apparently, one of the construction guys had filmed the whole thing and uploaded it to a local community page. By sunrise, the video had over 20,000 views. There she was, Karen, screaming orders at workers, blocking my driveway and trying to talk her way out of it when the police showed up. The comment section was brutal. Classic HOA Karen. She really thought she owned the whole neighborhood. Hope he sues her. I didn't even have to say a word. The internet did the talking for me. By noon, the HOA oversight office called. They'd fast-tracked the investigation after seeing the viral clip. Turns out Karen had been misusing HOA funds for over 3 years, approving fake maintenance requests, double-charging residents, and funneling money into special projects that led straight to her personal accounts. They froze the HOA's accounts immediately and suspended Karen pending a full audit. And just like that, the Queen lost her crown. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the same officers who'd once given her all the respect in the world load boxes of files from her house into the back of a city van. It felt surreal. A few neighbors walked over awkwardly at first. The Johnsons, the Andersons, people who'd once avoided eye contact with me in the street. Now thanked me quietly. "You stood up to her," Mrs. Johnson said. "We all wanted to, but we were scared." I smiled faintly. So was I. For the first time in months, the air in Oakshire Meadows felt lighter, like the weight of her control had finally lifted. But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the city. Karen was being charged with fraud, misappropriation of community funds, and harassment. The HOA had voted to remove her permanently, and her assets were being reviewed for restitution. I could have celebrated, but I didn't feel like it. See, revenge doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's just quiet. You spend so long fighting someone that when it's finally over, you're left standing there realizing how much of yourself you lost along the way. Still, I knew it had to happen. She'd made life miserable for so many people. A few days later, I was walking home when I saw her for the first time since that night. Karen was standing at the edge of the neighborhood next to a for sale sign in her yard. Her once perfect lawn looked overgrown. Her roses, those expensive HOA-funded roses, had started to wilt. She noticed me. Our eyes met. For a second, I almost expected her to yell, to throw one last insult my way. But she didn't. She just looked tired, defeated. I nodded once, then kept walking. Weeks passed. The new interim HOA board actually started listening to residents. They fixed streetlights, opened financial records, and even held monthly meetings online, so no one could twist the facts. People started smiling again. Kids played outside. It felt like a real neighborhood for the first time in years. But one morning as I was cleaning my porch, a local news van pulled up. A reporter stepped out with a camera crew. "Mr. Devon," she called. "Mind if we ask a few questions?" About what I asked, though I already knew. About the HOA fraud case, she said. "You were the first to expose it." I sighed, chuckling. I didn't expose it. Karen exposed herself. I just stopped cleaning up after her mess. She laughed and the camera rolled. They asked about everything. The harassment, the fines, the driveway, the cement truck. I told them the truth. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted peace. That clip aired on the evening news, and the next morning people from nearby communities reached out asking how they could fight back against their own corrupt boards. It hit me then. What had started as a personal battle had turned into something bigger. But just when I thought it was all behind me, there was one final twist. A letter arrived from the city attorney's office. It contained a check with a note attached. Restitution for damages and legal fees. HOA fraud case 2974. Paid in full by the defendant. I stared at the number printed on that check. It wasn't just enough to cover my driveway repairs. It was enough to rebuild my whole front yard. I laughed, not out of greed or victory, but out of disbelief that it had actually come full circle. The woman who once tried to fine me for having the wrong shade of mailbox had just paid for my entire home restoration. A week later, as contractors fixed my driveway, I noticed something poetic. The same cement truck company Karen had hired that night. They were the ones pouring new concrete for me, this time by my request on my terms. One of the workers recognized me. "Man, that lady really lost it, huh?" he said with a grin. "Yeah," I replied quietly. She did. When they finished, I stood there looking at the smooth, freshly paved driveway gleaming under the afternoon sun. It wasn't just concrete. It was closure. That evening as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I sat outside again. Same chair, same porch, same cup of coffee. Only this time I wasn't waiting for trouble. I was at peace. I thought about how small choices, standing up, speaking out, not backing down, can change everything. How a single act of courage can ripple through a community. And somewhere deep down, I hope Karen found her own peace too. Maybe losing control was exactly what she needed to find herself again. The camera would fade out here if this were a movie. A quiet neighborhood at dusk. No yelling, no sirens, no HOA drama. Just a man finally free from the chaos he never asked for. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living free. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that prove karma always finds its way.